Welcome to Live Your Passion. I'm your host, Alex Stephen. By sharing the wisdoms from my life journey of raising a successful deaf child and making a life-altering decision, I empower people to transform their lives to one of freedom and fulfillment. On Live Your Passion, our guests share their stories and their wisdoms through the challenges that they went through, how they embraced them and overcame them. Hopefully, you can gain some wisdoms from their story to help you on your journey. I'm an author, a speaker, and a transformation coach. To further help you in this discussion, I have free resources on my website at alexstephen.com. This morning, I have a guest with me who is originally from England. His name is Tony Sherman, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, Alex.
Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you. Great opportunity to be here.
Yeah.
And thank you. So, my name's Tony Sherman. Originally, I'm from England. My wife is Irish, so we live in America because it's neutral territory. Well, that's what we tell each other. And we moved around England, Ireland, Europe for a number of years with 3 small boys, and then we landed in just outside the Bay Area in Walnut Creek in California. Spent a decade in California, and then we came to the East Coast, primarily just as the 2008 crash was happening. That was a huge transformation point for my family. We came here, and we live locally in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and they have a great technical high school, which was the best thing that ever happened to my middle son, Daniel. Okay. So that's how we came to be here.
Yes, and I live in Marlborough also.
Right.
So we live in the same town. So tell us a little bit. I know from our previous discussion, you have some interesting experiences that you want to share with the audience. And we do have a long time, so it's pretty, pretty short time, but there's some great experiences you want to share. And as you named it rightfully so, it's transitions.
Yes.
So if you want to tell us, in terms of your first transition that you want to share with us this morning.
Right. All that moving around the world that I mentioned was driven by being a contract or a lead technical project manager in bigger and bigger projects. So when I landed in California, I ended up running a $50 million program with hundreds of people under me and so forth, and that was what I was good at. But then we got to a point in our lives where we really felt a call to the ministry, and the call to the ministry was very confusing. Luckily we were in a community that could affirm it and so forth, but what happened was once we sort of stepped into it, everything got stripped away from us. We'd given our house to a couple while we went back to England to get our green cards, because they ran the risk of being homeless. When we came back, we felt like we couldn't take it off them and leave them homeless, so we were homeless. But this is how God provides, because in that, we ended up living in a 5-star golf course, and we ended up living in a number of places free of charge because people were supporting what we were doing, the move in the ministry. But every day we couldn't see the next step. It was like we were running up against a brick wall, and suddenly one thing would open and we'd step into that one thing, and then we'd be lost again. And then we'd step into the next thing. And every day it was like doing a brick wall until we got the call to the ministry. Excuse me, Alex. I've got something in my eye. And moved to Corning, California. When we were in Corning, it was the most amazing spiritual experience I've ever had, and I hated every minute of it. What happened was we went to pastor a church where there was only 6 people, and to rebirth it and revitalize it, and there was no money there. We had a roof over our head, and that's all we had. But I was called to do a full-time ministry, not a part-time. So what happened was we would just pray, and resources would arrive, not always money, but we always had enough to feed the boys. Like one day I said, Lord, if you don't do something for me today, I have to renege. I have to go get a job. I'm responsible for a wife and 3 young boys. And I went to pull out what I thought would be more bills. There was one envelope in the letterbox, and it had just my address, no note in it, and just 2 crisp $100 bills. And I got to tell you, Alex, I probably got half a dozen stories like that. But what that did was that taught me that when you're in a tough place, There are more resources than you will ever know around you. Don't limit what can happen by what you think you can see and you can control. That was a huge transformation for me.
Huge transformation. And what I'm hearing from your story, Tony, is that you had faith and you had trust.
Yes.
You didn't know what was coming the next day, but you just got up and you went out in faith and you prayed and things happened for you.
Absolutely. But I would also say that I have secular friends who struggle in really tough points, and they take from my lessons. And I have my best friend in the world is going through an incredible struggle right now, and he's very secular, doesn't have a spiritual life, but he knows from the examples that he's seen me go through not to limit what can happen in his life by what he can see.
Yes.
And every time I keep telling him, don't limit the possibilities in your life by what you can see. And that transitional situation really taught me to relax and not be worried if I can't see a solution. I mean, you have to work at it.
Yes.
You can't just sit there, Alex.
Yeah.
But it's a phenomenal lesson to learn.
So how long did you pastor the church?
So I was in the pastorate for about 7 years, and I did a couple of church turnarounds and revivals, but then it got to the point, and I think we mentioned this in the introduction, where my boys were older teenagers, they needed somewhere settled down, and I needed to really think about college for them, and going, $100 bill at a time through life was just getting a little bit, wasn't quite going to fit where we needed to go next. And there was a bunch of other pressures that pushed us and made us sense it was time to move. And again, it was God's grace. We came to New England, which is a fantastic area to live in. People want to go to California. I'm pleased I live there, but I love New England. We came here. Assabet Valley Technical High School is here, and it coached my middle son through high school and got him through a high school diploma, which we think is a bit of a miracle because he's not an academic young man. He since has left and joined the Marines. He served in Afghanistan, and that's because of the quality of the schools in New England. So it was a fantastic move, but it was difficult again because I was in the pastorate, and then when I went back into industry, I did really well for the first 18 months, and then I struggled like crazy, Alex. And what I found was that I'd lost my sense of priority. I was just doing the day-to-day work, and it was getting more and more and more, and I was getting more and more pressure building up, and it was building up, and I didn't know how to get out of it. But I'd made this transition, and I felt I couldn't walk away from it. And again, it was in prayer and just stepping back that I realized I'd learned a lot of lessons in the pastorate that I could actually use in day-to-day life.
In corporate
America. And just stepping back and asking myself, actually not what work do I need to do, but what 3 things do I need to get done this week and today for this day to be. And I only now, my whole day is based around 3 things. Today I have 1 thing, to be with you. But I never have more than 3 things. Once I realized that, I'd still have lots of work to do, but I'd do the important stuff, not the urgent stuff. And that was a huge transformation. When I was younger and very successful in the IT area, I would just muscle it through. Do you understand what I mean? You just do it, you're younger. I'd got to a point where I needed to be more thoughtful, and I combined the lessons that I'd had from the IT world, from the pastorate world, and that molded me into the current career I had up until the 7th of June this year.
So what I hear you saying is you prioritize and you have a limit on what you will do so that you're not that hectic running around, not accomplishing as much as you do now.
And also I found with friends who struggle with depression, when I share that part of my story with them, I say to them, I know sometimes you do well and other times you feel like a complete failure, but if you just pick 3 things to do every day, you can never be a failure. And I have a number of friends who use that as one of the tenets of how they structure their day, because depression is a strange thing. It's best description I ever heard is like the weather. It's going to come and it's going to go, and you have no control over it.
No control.
But they put that in the structure of how they live their lives to make sure that every day there's a sense of they did something, and they don't feel overwhelmed all the time. Does that make sense?
So you accomplish something, and what I tell people is celebrate your victories.
Absolutely.
No matter how small, and that gives you the confidence to go further, so you don't feel like you're wasting the day. You know, you accomplish something, however small.
Yes.
So recognize it. Don't just brush over it. Recognize it, and then move on.
Correct.
So that's a good. So in terms of the pastorate, what are some of the accomplishments? I know you said when you went there were 6 people in the church, but being there 7 years, I'm sure you had some good accomplishments.
I didn't actually, and that
You
was
didn't?
I mean, I've been a bit flippant, but there were 6 when we got there,
Yeah.
and then 2 years later there were 8, and I was so upset, and I called my mentor and I said, John. And John is a missionary who has led a whole nation to Christ.
Right.
So, and he's my mentor, and I'm very grateful for that. And I said, John, I'm failing. And he said, well, can we discuss your failures? And I said, well, we started with 6 and now we've got 8. I just feel like giving up and walking away. And he said, but you told me about this person who's given up in addiction, this person who's turned around and got a job, these people who came out of jail. I said, well, yes, but they're not coming to my church. And he said, oh, so it's about you, is it, Tony?
Yeah.
I went, well, not really.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation, and he taught me a valuable lesson in picking the right metrics, in picking the measurements of success that are truly important. And then what happened, God blessed at that point, we moved from 6 to 60 in about 18 months after that. And we grew the church to, we were running mid 80s near the end, and then I moved to transition to work in another church.
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, there was success, and like you were measuring it by the membership.
Right.
And what your mentor was saying is measured by the results.
Yeah, by the transformations.
Transformation. You're changing people's lives and getting them off addiction, and you're counseling people who came out of prison, things like that to assimilate. So those were results that you were not paying attention to.
Absolutely.
You were just looking, well, from 6, I want to go to 60 or 100. You know, that's how we, and that's a good thing about having a mentor and a coach.
Oh, very much so. I do believe in the power. I have 3 coaches at the moment. Just because they see things differently, they hold you accountable differently than you do yourself.
Exactly.
You know, and I enjoy that about the pastorate, working with people, watching them flourish. Once John took my eye off the numbers and showed me to look at the people, and just let God work in those people, because I'm not going to transform them, but God will. You know, and so if I'm doing that, then it's a far more easier path, and it's far more enjoyable, Alex.
It's far more enjoyable. Yeah, that absolutely. So tell us about your other transition. I know you said you took, you know, your experience in pastoring and you brought it to your next transition.
Right. And that happened on the 7th of June. Now, that's actually it happened, I'll tell you, it happened at 5:20 in the morning on the 7th of June. I woke up in the morning, and I was in a situation where I felt like I'd slept badly on one side of my body, and I couldn't move it. So I played with my body for a while, and I realized I really couldn't move it. And I was so lucky that sleeping next to me is my wife for 25 years, who is a stroke awareness counselor. And I woke her up and said, honey, I think I'm having a stroke. Well, she heard, blah, 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 and I didn't realize I couldn't speak. So anyway, they rushed me to hospital. I was very fortunate with the stroke. As you can tell now, my language centers came back fairly quickly. I've got most of my movement. I have some paralysis around here that isn't visible and doesn't affect my day-to-day life. But it did blow a hole in my brain that was quite large. And there's a lot of rewiring that had to go on in the first few months. But in that time, what it allowed me to do was to sit back and to exactly what you said, Alex, to take what I'd learned as a young IT professional when I was really leading high pressure teams, to take what I'd learned in the pastorate, to take the way I'd combine those things in my current career, which effectively has come to an end, and say, how can I use all of those to make the next step of transition? Because life gives you rich experiences. Some are good, some are bad, but you don't have to throw them away. And what I've decided to do is I'm going in, and successfully I've started to get some contracts in corporate training, teaching what I'm passionate about in terms of giving professional services. And I'm excited. My brand is called The Implementation Rabbi. I go in, I spend time, and I use the models that I learned in the pastorate of coming alongside people, helping them to implement whatever their company needs, training their people, seeing them transformed. It is truly an exciting experience.
Yeah.
But I call the stroke now my stroke of luck,
Yeah.
but it was the hardest couple of months when I first had it. Feeling emotionally overwhelmed, not understanding how my new brain worked. It was all very, very stressful.
Right. So stroke of luck, that's, that's a good term. A very good term, stroke of luck. And in that time, that's when we reflect and we, in terms of gratitude.
Yes.
And see what we're grateful for. Your wife was a stroke specialist.
Oh, yes.
That's, you got to be grateful for that. And, so tell us a little bit, you tell us all the transitions you had, where you've been, and, share with the audience a little bit, emphasize a little more some of the tools and some of the things that you use to get you to where you are today.
That is a great question, Alex, because I've got a little surprise for you. So, let me find it. I have a deck of cards here.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Now, and I have some cocktail sticks.
Yeah.
I'd like you to pick one of those cocktail sticks for me.
Okay.
And just push it. I've started to cut there. Just push it through the deck of cards. Careful. It goes all the way through. Push it all the way down now so the audience can see it. So, what we've got here is you've just pushed something through a solid block.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt on both on the stroke one and on the one when I went to the pastorate. I thought there was no way I could get through this solid deck of cards.
Yeah.
But if you keep pushing, you can get through.
Yeah.
And then at the other end, you tend to think, okay, I got through. But here's the thing that I learned when I was doing both, that I took from the pastorate transition and I applied to the stroke transition, so I didn't panic as much. Now, use your intellect. How do we get this through a deck of cards or through this box of cards? Your first thought is maybe the box is empty?
Well, there was, least resistance where I went through. There was some like a hole, so to speak, that you could go through. But
okay.
Your perception is, it's either solid or it's empty.
It's either empty, or maybe I've got a little bit of OCD and I've cut a hole in every single one of the cards.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you the deck of cards in here, and we'll see that there's not a hole in those. So take that out, and hold your hands out, and both hands, because I don't want to spill these everywhere. You got it?
So we have a magician in the studio this morning.
But this is the point.
Yeah.
The point here is you think your problems are a solid block.
Yeah.
And when I'm sitting with people and I do this and they laugh and they say, okay, so how did you do it? And I say, hey, it's magic.
Yeah.
But the point is, we think so often that when we're trying to get through a problem, we have to know how to get through the problem. And you don't.
You don't need to know how.
The technique of overcoming is to spend each day the best way you can and to prioritize 2 or 3 wins that will bring you pleasure and make them happen. And then once you've started to do that as a daily habit, you'll find that the world of opportunity that you can access is a lot like this Kindle.
Yeah.
I love this thing. This is just a fantastic thing. I have over 1,000 Kindle books here. So anytime I want to access a book, I can literally reach out into the cloud, pull it down onto this tiny little thing that I can keep in my pocket, and for $10 I can access any book in the world almost. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
As you start to walk through and get through your problems, just doing one thing at a time, 2 things at a time, 3 at most at a time, what you'll find is the world of possibility, which is beyond what you thought it was, you've overcome in ways that you don't understand.
Yeah.
There are suddenly so many things that you can access. This is a doorway, and I see this as like my prayer life. When I go and pray and spend some time, there's so much more that God has out there that you can access and channel through prayer. That's how I overcome.
Yeah, yeah. And that's good advice for the audience and a good, a good visual to see. So that's pretty good. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? Nuggets. I know this is a great story to help them with their challenges, to help them overcome.
So I think the key thing is not to think that what you can see today is all that's out there. A lot of times when I'm struggling with depression, when I was struggling with the stroke in the early days, I thought that my limitations that I had then were going to define me for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I was very, very nervous. I can feel the emotion in me now.
Yeah.
However, I have embarked on a third career, which I'm just as excited about as the other two, and I'm taking the best of those two. That is a minor miracle that I am so proud and pleased for.
Yeah.
But the thing was not to believe that what I was struggling with today was, one, all there was, and two, was the rest of my life, that I couldn't change anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So, I mean, that's pretty good. Pretty good stories, and how you overcame, and and any nuggets you want to share with the audience? Any tools? Or
no,
anything?
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty good. Just love to hear what Tony had to share, his transitions and how he overcame them. What I'm hearing him say is that you must have faith, and we do always know the how. What we have to do is do our part to get there and get up every morning and the grace, be thankful for the grace, be in gratitude.
Yep.
That is what you have to do, and the how is not our concern. It's just that we want to get there. We make the commitment, and we will get there. The universe is more powerful than us, and we have to believe. And this is what Tony did, and all the transitions in his life. And I love the story of the stroke of luck. I love that, that term. So it's great to have you here, to have you sharing.
I've had so much fun.
Yeah, really appreciate it, and I know our audience will get something from what you share in your stories, so
Thank
to
you,
speak.
Alex.
One of the things I like to do on the show is read from my book, The Inspirational Life Quotes, a collection for your daily motivation, is to read the quote for the day that we do in the show. And let me see. Today is, the end of your rope is the beginning of God's doorstep. Is that relevant to your stroke?
I am just amazed at today's quote.
Yeah, and it's unknown. We don't know who wrote this quote. The end of your rope is the beginning of God's doorstep. Every time I do a show and I do the quote, it's always relevant to the show. I don't know how that happens. I just want to show some of the other books that I have. They're all on Amazon. And this is Courage in Our Hearts, A Family's Love Story. And it's on Amazon. And with that, we have an accompaniment, Discover Your Inner Treasure. And our latest book, IP Goals Made Easy, just won an award. And all these books are on Amazon. So I want to say, thanks a lot, Tony, for being on the show, gracing us with your presence.
Thank you.
And I just want to remind you again, I have free resources at alexstephen.com. And being the season, I want to give something free to the audience, Personal Development Power Pack. So you could go to personaldevelopmentpowerpack.com or pdpowerpack.com for some free resources. I have audios, videos from people like Les Brown, a lot of people in the personal development community, and it's free to you. And again, I'm Alex Stephen, your host. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Production support provided by Medfield.tv. access to our community.